About startups in Kenya, and with me I have Wallace Kadima, who is the CEO Talit, and he's here to just give us a perspective since he is the owner of Talit, and just tell us his journey. First of all, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
All right, when you talk about startups, you know this name is always thrown around, startups. So from where you sit, what is a startup?
A startup, you can say it's a young business, that offers a solution either through a product or a service, right? So basically, it's just a young business. It's like having an idea and package it into a company. So that's a startup, So I always say a startup is the Juakali sector of the corporate, right? You're not an SME, but you're not a company. I mean, a corporate company, right? So you're somewhere there. And most startups, basically, they start with a founder. You're the marketer, you're the sales agent, you're the So that's just the nature of a startup. You are the whole company.
So you are everything.
You're everything. Yeah.
All right. And now, how did you even start? When you look at Talit, how did you even start?
Yeah. Talit started in 2015, right? We were in a class, and then our lecturer challenged us. How do you take this knowledge you have and package it in something that SMEs can use, right? And then later, a year later, one of our co-founder, right? The mother was starting a gas business, right? And she was trying to see how better to manage the business, So it was an idea that came from school, but it was implemented by the SME. So the first module of sales and profit we created because we had a business, So that's how we started Talit, and it was all about, trying to help her manage her business better, right? And from her, we came to realize so many people have these challenges, I want to manage like 10 businesses at the same time, but I can't do that. I have to wake up in the morning, go this business, go that business, right? So in Talit, we created a system in how you can manage 10, 15 business at the center. So you'll be here on a show, you look at one of your grocery there, Pale, Nyamakima, and then you have a hardware store. So that's just the idea of Talit, and how do you make accounting easy and real time. Yeah.
All right, and even as you've explained, we usually have challenges that because any startup, when you're starting something, there's always, first of all, when you're starting something, you have an idea, yes?
True.
But now the execution is usually maybe the problem. So many startups that have failed in Kenya or that have not even started, what would be the thing that is holding them back?
And I'm glad you say idea, The currency to a startup is an idea. There is no startup without an idea. First, you start with the idea. What is my startup? I want to take people to moon, right? How do you want to take people to moon? That becomes the next question. And who's your consumer? And do you have money, right? So I always say startup don't fail because of the idea. It's the execution part of that idea. Because you look at this, a startup founder, maybe you're 22, 23, 24, 26, right? You're not even a CEO of anything. By the virtue of your idea that makes you a CEO, right? And you see the average lifetime, as in the average time it takes to create a CEO, become a CEO in this country is like 10 to 15 years. So you're taking a 23, 24-year person, and you're a CEO. So there's a lot of things you need to learn in one day. That's why you say a year in a startup is like, what, 10 years? So you have to teach yourself how to do these things all at the same time. So the execution part of the startup is where most people fail, not the idea. Because most ideas are brilliant. You hear young people talk about ideas, they like move you like, okay, now this is something nice. Now when you come to execute this idea, you need a team, right? You need a marketer, you need a communications guy, you need a HR, and then you see maybe me, I'm just an engineer. The only thing I know is how to create I don't know how to communicate even my product to the market. So I always say startup is all about kushirikiana. The problem about we young people is like we want to be everything at the same time. I say 10% of 1 billion is 100 million, right? 100% of 1 million is 1 million. Your aim is to make sure you grow value to your startup, right? Not about the percentage, how much you own. So if you have an idea, and you don't have money to start that idea, even in your class, where you are, you can always plug in people, right? And the beauty part about a startup is finding unconventional ways on how to create solutions, right? So you can have a startup, right? But you see you don't have money to plug in. So you can do 8 to 5, your normal job. And then you can create your startup in part-time. So you can have 6 or 5 guys, you have kushirikiana, that's the idea. And then everyone plugs in, because me, I'm good in maybe talking. You give me a marketing, how do you talk to your to your clients? How do you even raise capital, right? Because you see, when you start actually in the Kenyan landscape, the first people you start talking to your startup is your friends and your family, right? And mostly it's issue about debt. So let me talk about tech, because I know tech, right? the average life to create a product is like 3 years. You get? And in that 3 years, you have to pump in money. You get? Remember, you don't have this money.
Yes.
I came to Kevin and asked you, I need maybe 100,000. I went to someone else, I need 200, I need 400,000, right? And then you create this bag of capital, and now you pump in your startup. And then 1 year, 2 years down the line, your product is way so far, you can't even pay these people. You get? So you are stuck in, do I pay these people, or do I keep on growing my startup?
Yes.
That's why I always say the first thing as you create your startup, if you can't find a good lawyer, because you need a lawyer to be able to communicate to your people that I can't pay you, you know, this guy can't pay you at this point in time. Not because, you know, because things are not working the way they are supposed to work. And if you can't find a lawyer, find someone who can communicate to your investors. Find someone who can communicate to your debt holders. Because that's how startup fail. Because you are 2 years down the line, you are like 2, 4, 5 million dying in, and there's no money coming because your product is not even ready. You can't even show a product fit to the market. So Kevin is always calling me, pesa yangu iko wapi?
Yes.
Okay, so you need someone to be able to alleviate this risk for you. Get someone who can be able to talk to other people and say, okay, Kevin borrowed you A, but because of A, B, C, and D, this is what is happening. Why don't you give him more time? And so that you can focus on your startup. Because look at this way, if you can't have that person to be able to communicate that to your debt holders or your equity holders, it is you who will be doing that. And you see your time has to be spent in your startup. Remember, you are the marketer, you are the sales, you're part of the coding team. If you are a tech, that is,
All right, and even as we were speaking earlier, you told me around 100, you find that within maybe 300 startups, maybe like 5 only make it, or 10 of them make it. Or maybe it might not be the numbers, but meaning that not very many of them usually make it. So what is this one thing that makes them not even move past the execution period? And also we've spoken about the way you've really explained. So what is this thing that usually makes the startups not even reach to where they're supposed to reach?
You have 4 hours.
Just summarize it, because honestly, because someone starts a business and then they say, okay, a startup, and then they say, I started 1 year and then I closed.
You know, I always say in tech, everyone starts from the Elon Musk moment, right? You have an idea, you think you become the next billionaire, right? And then you raise capital if you're lucky. You know, your idea gets your capital, and once you get this money, then you realize it's not your money, right? It's other people's money. You have to work for this money, Now, imagine someone at 23, 24, you've never seen 100 million in your account, and you give me 100 million. There's excitement, there's anxiety, and you have to call, you always have to check in with your investor, how is the startup going? So when you put all this in one basket, that pressure is what makes startups fail, right? And the execution part of startup, I think I can summarize in 4. First is investors, and a bad investor can really start up for 10 or 15 years, or even never make it to market, right? So a good investor is like a good suit, I always say that, because an investor is a team player, right? Remember, the startup is a ship, you are the captain of the ship. There are crew members, right? There's your team and there's the investors. No investors, there's no one who puts money to gain losses.
Yes.
No one, right? So a good investor is a team player. I have invested 1 million in your company. It is to my benefit to see that company grow so I can plow back my million and some profit. So a good investor is like a good suit. So look for good investors. Now the problem is, when you're starting, you don't have time to choose a good investor, right? You start with the money you get, and that's where we go wrong. Second thing I think is local investors understanding what is the startup landscape. Like tech, like I told you, to put a product in tech is 3 to 4 years, right? You're still pumping money, and Kenya is like a good business or service business, right? So me, I'm Wallace Kadima. I own what? I own a meat shop. I have been successful. I have one in Kisumu, one in Busia, one in Kakamega. I'm well endowed in terms of resources, right? I want to invest in your fintech, right? They know the way I understand business is stock money to my account, plow back, right? You are telling me I'm giving you millions to develop. 3 years down the line,
Yes.
I haven't seen the product. It's the reason why people say, aha, the WhatsApp. And like, there are so many WhatsApp versions in Kenya, like tech startups in Kenya. The reason they are stuck is local investors, the one that invest, they don't understand the landscape. If you're going to invest in a tech startup, first you have to give it 3 to 4 years before you even become a product fit. Because remember, there are very, very few industries at this point in time that are untapped. So you're coming to an industry where there are players in that industry. And the whole nature of a startup is what? Disrupt the market, right? So your idea and your product has to be extremely, extremely, extremely good for you even to compete. Not even generate profit, to compete, right? Even to just get that one client who would believe in you. And that means taking a lot of resources just to develop that idea. And you have a local investor who's pumped money in that company, you get? So if that pressure becomes too much, an investor can quit. I mean, a founder can quit. You know what? You run with the business. I think you know more about business than I do. So another thing is perseverance. The reason why these startups fail is all about perseverance. Because let me tell you, if you're looking for motivation to invest in a startup, I've always say that. Because look at this, you're learning to be a CEO in less than 3 or 4 years. You're learning to be an expert in a field you're not even good at, right? So perseverance is the reason why these startups, people talk about Elon Musk so much and they forget Elon Musk, there's a time he was showering at YMCA, right? And that is why he was showering, because he couldn't afford to do anything. And I see, when you talk about Silicon Valley, they love the garage story, I started my startup in garage. In Kenya, it's the briefcase, I remember when you're starting a startup or office or somewhere in a cafe there. So that's where you come see a client and you buy a coffee for 300. And you last me there, Because that is what you can afford at that point in time, right? So your briefcase is all your office. So we have to appreciate these humble beginnings and perseverance if you're going to make startups in this country. Yeah.
And lastly, even as we close, our time is up. So lastly, as we move forward as a country, is Kenya in an environment where we can say startups are going to be thriving?
I think we are, but so much needs to be done from both us as founders, for investors, local investors, because I believe we can't always depend on international investors to grow our companies. We have to have local investors who can plug in. And when local investors come to this to invest in these companies, they need to understand there's a time horizon, And also the government in terms of legislation, right? There is I think there's a gap in terms of legislation of ideas, How can we be able to create legislation that can protect someone with an idea? Because I'm going to a big company to negotiate, the only thing I have is my idea. This company has 1,001 resources that can go against me, right? So if I have legislation where I can be able to protect my idea, so when I go negotiate with you, at least I know even if you can't take my idea, I won't see it tomorrow in the market. So we are at the center of, I think, of a revolution right now, because there's so many investments doing tech, but we need more. And we also need to learn the startups which have failed. For every successful startup, there are 100 which have failed. If you can learn to appreciate these people who have failed, there won't be 100, there will be 20, 30, 10, and then we can reduce the failure. So we should not stop stigmatizing founders, No one founder wants to create a pyramid scheme. Things go against your expectation, and that usually happens.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us. Our time is up.
I'm grateful.
All right. That is Wallace Kadima, who is the CEO Talit, and we have been discussing about how startups can make it even in this business environment of our country. All right. That's it from Business Cafe.